little smoke up in the sky. Pretty soon you'll learn to fly. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. Well, might go quickly say to me, Mom, you better watch your feet. Lava come down soft and hot. You're loving me now or loving me not. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano comes. Oh, no time to count for what it's worth. 'Cause I just left this planet Earth. Where I go, I hope there's rum. I know there's gonna be a lot on the island tomorrow. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. Lord, I don't wanna land in New York City. I wanna land in no Mexico. Don't wanna land no Green Island. Don't wanna see my skin glow. Don't wanna land Comanche, Skyport, or in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't wanna land no San Juan Airport or the Yukon Territory. Don't wanna land no San Diego. Don't wanna land no Buzzards Bay. Don't wanna land no Iota. I got nothing more to say. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. No, 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 no.
All right, happy Thursday night, everybody. It's Wes Siler with Preserve Navarre Live, and Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman
Hey,
is
it's good
here.
to be
Hey,
here, Wes.
sir. It's great to have you here, sir. So this is somebody that you guys have been asking for several weeks now, and I'm so grateful, sir, that you took the time to spend with us. This is going to be an awesome show. I really can't wait. So let me know if the sound is coming in. This is a live show, so we do this every Thursday night here in Navarre. Looks like we've got 6 or 7 folks that have jumped on. Let me make sure that the sound's coming through, the pictures quality, all that stuff is great. Comments are going, but we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and it's going to be a great show. Okay, Nancy's on. She says the sound is good. Awesome. So, yeah, it's a live show that we enjoy doing. We also do the recording of this and put that out there during the week, but we've been doing this for a few weeks now and have a lot of fun through it. But I'm excited for you, sir, to go through all the stuff that you've brought me because normally I ask, folks for pictures, and I get maybe 1 or 2. We have fun with that. I've got the treasure trove, y'all. It's going to be awesome. We've got a lot of initiatives to talk through, a lot of things that you're involved in. Your background is just, absolutely incredible. We've had some wonderful people on this show with fascinating stories, but I think you're going to add a lot to it, what you've done. And I think a lot of the people that watch this show, that get involved, as well as a lot of the initiatives that we're going to talk about. All right, Chaz is on there. He says the sound is good as well. That's great. All right, we're going to jump into it. What I like to do before we get into kind of the meat of the show is I always love to go through the sponsors that make it possible. We were talking about that just a few minutes ago. This is a hobby for me. It's something that I enjoy doing once a week, but it's only made possible because we've got several local businesses here in Navarre that have contributed to make it possible. One of the first ones that jumped on was Tom and Helen Tuttle from the Panhandle shop. So these folks have a little woodworking shop where they sell these gorgeous, beautiful flags. So you can see those right there.
I've seen one.
Yeah. So you got one right here in the studio that we have all the time. I love these things. That kind of shows you how big they can make them. They got me this, my team, whenever I came back from being overseas. So just absolutely gorgeous what Tom and Helen can do, and with going aways and stuff like that. It's a great project for people. They can customize them. That's my favorite one right there. We could do one for you, pretty easily, I'm sure, with the Marine Corps on there. But I love how they do this stuff, and it's just an awesome thing. A lot of fun. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But one thing we got to settle is we were kind of going back and forth between the different branches early on. So you know where I stand.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get this out. So this is one of my favorite ones that I can at least talk about on here. This is one of my favorite memes from the different branches, and it's talking about the communications. That folks, I don't know if you've seen this one, but it's got a group from the Navy talking about comms, and they said, hey, listen, sometimes you're at sea, you won't be able to have contact with anybody. And the Army, it says sometimes you'll experience a lack of communication out in the field. I'm sure that happens. With the Marines, you know about this. When you're in the midst of battle, your communication equipment may break. And in Air Force, hey, listen, if your Wi-Fi goes down in your hotel room, just talk to the front desk.
Life is good in the chair force, as I said earlier.
That's been my experience too. Like, I've done deployments, all over and worked with pretty much every branch. But Air Force, it's like, you're at an Air Force base when the comm guy's there, and he's just like, hey, just want to make sure that your hotspot's working out well. Are you able to stream, talk to your wife, everything good? Okay, we'll be here. Just let us know.
Well, I have a tendency to watch my mouth around here. I have come to learn that you might want to hold off on the Air Force chair force jokes because you got PJs, you got combat controllers, you got AFSOC here. I know a bunch of the instructors over there, and they would tear me to pieces. Right? So
we all appreciate you saying that. Yeah. So that's one of the fun things about the missions and the bases around here. Is there's a lot of joint work, so I've had the chance to work with all the different branches. I mean, you got the Army guys up there at 7th Group, but yeah, I mean, the Air Force guys are nothing to sneeze at. I got a bunch of friends that do the missions you're talking about, and it's incredible. It's a wonderful mission. Several of them around here, all the different branches, and then just the opportunity to travel all over the world and see cool people doing amazing things. A lot of fun. So I know we have a lot of shared experience with that. We also know a lot of the same people, as I was mentioning. So one of those is Carmen Reynolds. She's watching every time. And Carmen has this beautiful initiative that she's trying to do in Santa Rosa County called the Veterans Treatment Court. And she's trying to build a charity around this idea where she would be able to lead and initiate a treatment court for veterans in our county that doesn't currently exist. I think they have them in Escambia, from what I've heard, of Okaloosa, but not in Santa Rosa County. And this is particular to veterans who find themselves in a bad spot, right? And it gives them the resources and the particular treatment and the understanding from the legal system that they need, because veterans go through a lot of different stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, so just an incredible thing that she's doing. And she's got our full support. We work with her on this stuff all the time.
So while we don't want to abscond the veteran from his or her responsibilities, being a law-abiding citizen and a contributing member of the local society, local community here, but the fact is the Veterans Treatment Court, started by Judge Pat Maney, actually here locally, Okaloosa County, brought it down from Buffalo, New York. I think is where the first Vet Treatments Court actually started many years ago. And then Judge Gary Burgosh over in Escambia County has been running it for Escambia County. And what it does is it takes the whole picture into consideration. Not that others, non-veterans shouldn't get that opportunity as well. But let's face it, they volunteered, they signed up typically in a time of war. A lot of them engage the enemy kind of thing.
Right.
And so what it does is it allows, a responsible judicial procedure to take a look at the whole scenario and put them on a path that will allow a second chance kind of thing. But it's not an easy program, and it's a long enduring process. And if you make it out on the other side, you as a veteran, and I've seen it firsthand. I assisted with setting up our Veteran Treatment Court mentoring program with Judge Gary Burgosh and Carol Henry over there.
Awesome.
And they've been providing a lot of help to Carmen getting it started over here. And so it's not an easy program, but it's well worth it. And I got to tell you what, in a community like this,
right,
with 7 major DoD installations in 120-mile radius, we have tens of thousands of veterans here, active duty veterans and retirees. I mean, what better community to have that kind of second chance capability?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's very well said. I think there's a part of this that if you go through it, it ends with employment. I think it gets you, to that point where you're back, like you said, a productive member of society, and so you pay your debt, based on whatever happened. But then the goal is to get you back functioning, working, and because there was clearly a time where you could, there was a time where you were doing that, and so we know we can get back to that place if we work hard enough, and the person believes in it.
There's an overwhelming tendency in the wounded, injured, and disabled veteran community
Yeah.
of the world, or the systems that we have to deal with in society, are all stacked against me as the veteran, right? Because I went off and I did this. I left my family. I engaged the enemy. I got blown up. I saw my friends die. Whatever
Right.
the issues are, lots of veterans can say, yeah, no big deal. It's water off the duck's back. And lots aren't. So everybody's different. And they come back, and then they come back with all that baggage. They don't know how to frequently speak to their loved ones about what they saw, what they experienced, the
Right.
trials and tribulations of doing those kinds of things. And when you can't communicate something that's deep-seated, sometimes they can't even figure out what it is that's eating at them. Then you have a tendency to kind of pack that stuff down. You're layering it in,
Yeah.
and then you lose the job, or you kick the dog, or you, God forbid, smack the spouse, and now you've got law enforcement involved. You may have just lost the job. And there's all these things, and they're layering on, and it's that layering on process that, unfortunately, or fortunately, we have such a good VA system around here in place in terms of the capabilities of what the VA can do, and the Air Force Hospital and the Naval Hospital over there and all that kind of thing. But systems are systems. Bureaucratic processes are what they are, and invariably, so many of these veterans are getting caught up in that process, and they're layering it on with basically addressing issues with prescription grade medications, typically or
Right.
frequently opiate-based pain meds and antidepressants.
Yeah.
So now you got all that baggage swimming around, packing it in, not feeling like you can communicate, and now you're layering it in with 1, 2, some cases 20 or 30 different prescriptions.
Right.
Many times they're getting overdoses. Sometimes they're getting 60 days worth of these meds mailed to them, so they're not even seeing their practitioner.
Right.
You get them in 60-day lots, and you're done with eating them in 30 because you're starting to get addicted. Well, what are you going to do for that second 30 days before the next shipment? Well, not invariably, but frequently they'll go out and they'll replace what was coming in the mail with something on the street.
Yeah.
And with the fentanyl problem coming in this country, and they're dying like in droves. I mean, I know firsthand just in the last couple months, dead by fentanyl in our town right here.
Yeah.
And so then you add the bourbon, and it's the liquid courage,
Right.
and 18 to 31 times a day you get a veteran, and very frequently our first responders are killing themselves across the country.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a lead-in for America's Heroes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it for
Vacation
sure.
Outdoors, but
What I love
won't
about
try.
this one is very similar to what you're going to talk about with that as well, is you've got people behind this and that are working through it that are veterans themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so
it's
they
awesome.
understand, it's easy for, public opinion to move on. Oh, Afghanistan is ancient news. But for a lot of us, Afghanistan, Iraq, places like that, we were at war in those places 2 decades, right? Like, it doesn't just go away, in a matter of months or a couple of years. People are living with those effects, and having folks who understand that.
At the risk of talking on a sensitive topic with that, a lot of these veterans literally gave up their lives to
Yes.
go engage in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and other places over these last 24 years since 9/11. And whatever your thoughts are on 9/11 and how it happened, who perpetrated it and all that, but then to exit Afghanistan after all that treasure, all that effort,
Yeah,
and
all
to
the
leave
time.
that military hardware like that, to leave all those bodies in place, to exit the country like we did, that did nothing positive for any of us that spent time engaging over there.
Yeah, it was tough.
Right? None of it. That did not help the situation.
And having a place where you can go and talk about that and work through the effects of it, what you're feeling. That's amazing. We've already hit on this a lot. And it was one of the other sponsors for the show. I'm
Elizabeth.
so happy to talk about it.
Someday I'll get to
Elizabeth
meet
Kurz.
Elizabeth.
You
This
need
is
to meet her, sir.
mind-melting
You need to meet
stuff.
her because Elizabeth is she's a coach. She's a mentoring coach. Kind of got to focus on business, but not just that. She can, team building, the whole thing, but so much of it is mindset and talking about the subconscious. What's going on layers deep,
Yeah.
right? And calling people in a professional way to look at the nuts and bolts behind what you do. You may know Robert Reyes from Stripes.
I do.
So he was on this show a couple weeks ago, and we talked
Necessary to
about
me.
that. Robert talked about the change in mindset from going from the military into business, and it's a completely different mindset,
Yeah.
of how to build your team and how to talk to people. You can't just order them around, they work for you, but it's not the same as in the military when they work for you, right? And so he had to shift his mindset, but he still figured out ways to bring in his culture, right? And Stripes, the logo, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So he figured out ways to keep his past alive, but he also grew. Elizabeth is that kind of person, right? That's why I'm so excited to connect her to the Veterans Treatment Court and hopefully to some of the stuff you're doing, because she helps people make that change. She's an expert in the psychology of finding a positive mindset through what you're going through. And you just talked about it. In Afghanistan, you have this situation that is just deeply hurtful, right? And confusing and frustrating and in some ways depressing. Elizabeth's the kind of person that would draw that out. And a lot of her work, you know, we talk about counseling and stuff like that. A lot of her work is kind of that layer above it, of more kind of on the professional level of how do we put this into action to help you find, you know, labor, career, work, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, one of the things that helps me, we were talking about it earlier, is finding things to put my energy and time into that give me joy, you know, and this is obviously one of those things, but she's the kind of person who helps people find that. Here, let's discover a creative outlet. You're going to take those stripes that aren't on your sleeve anymore. We're going to make that your restaurant, right? She's that kind of person who would help somebody unlock some of those things. Really cool people and a friend. But we've talked about this already, so we've kind of hit all these topics, but I love kind of focusing on them as much as we can. The local heroes in the community. I remember when I used to come down here, I grew up in Tennessee and Memphis, and I would come down here for the vacations, for the beaches, man. Like, it's gorgeous, right? The Emerald Coast, you know, hey, let's go surfing or whatever we can get our, you know, rent a boat and go fishing, whatever we can get our, into. But you can miss the fact that there's incredible people here, and even folks who live here. A lot of military folks. They come, they live for a couple years, and they're on to their next assignment. Take a minute and think about where you're at and the type of legacy and history that's in the Panhandle, you know, and especially for us in Navarre. We mentioned Robert Reyes. There's military heroes. Rick Landers is another one that we love to talk about here, but not just military as well. I mean, you got people up in the NFL. Michael Carter's up there playing for the Cardinals. Kevin Lucas is an entrepreneur. He's in the medical field, cutting edge stuff that he's into. Jordan Jefferson is one we talked about last week, just got drafted. But I love seeing this. I love the people in this community and just the richness that they provide its culture as well. So that's a huge reason why we do this.
No,
so
that's great. There's so many more.
Yeah.
Heroes Among Us is a speaker series the Marine Corps League puts on, and the Pensacola Marine Corps League detachment, and every year, 6 months out of the year, last Thursday of the month, I think it is, they meet up at Veterans Memorial Park, and they bring in a local hero. We've got one of your AFSOC instructors coming in.
Nice.
Former MARSOC, Marine Special Operations guy who's teaching over here at AFSOC. He'll be talking to the crowd at the park. So.
And everybody's got a story. So you have people who grew up here, right? This is like, you know, their entire life has been in Navarre, Gulf Breeze, or Holly, or wherever. And then you have people that they did that and they left and they came back. And then you have people that are coming from, you know, who knows where, Michigan or Ohio or wherever, right? Like all kinds of different stories that kind of blend together to make this place what it is. So that's what I'm excited for you is hearing your story. So, you know, talk to me about that. This is the first picture you gave me and I love it, but talk to me about where you grew up and, you know, those early years.
Born in Manhattan on the East River there, and left there, went to the Bronx when by the time I was 3, and left there, lived by the Bronx Zoo.
I cannot tell by your accent that that's the case.
Yeah, I worked really hard to dump that New York accent and attitude as best I could.
When I grew up, I talked like that from Tennessee, and then military just cleaned me out.
There you go. Yeah. It's a great opportunity to clean up your accent, especially if you're from the South or New York City or Boston.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Carmel, which is about 50, 60 miles north of Manhattan, and went to Carmel High School, went to State University of New York, College of New Paltz, was all set to fail out of there because I wasn't really interested in academics, to be quite honest with myself and the world. And my roommate was on the swim team. He said, man, why don't you come on out? It's Division III swim team. You know, it's not like you need to be good. I'm like, swim team? I don't even know how to do what's a flip turn?
Right.
Took me 3 weeks to learn, and a highly motivated coach to say, look, man, you're good for the team attitude-wise. You're probably never going to win, place, or show at an event, but who cares about that?
Yeah.
And so that swimming experience for 3 or 4 years at a Division III school on a national championship team. One year we went undefeated. We had 4 All-Americans, and it was just such an opportunity to be around excellence.
Yes.
But it also allowed me to be in shape, which I love that aspect of it, and allowed me to, essentially kind of do what I want as long as I made decent grades, right? And so it was just a phenomenal experience and taught me a lot about competitiveness and stick-to-itiveness and motivation and inspiration and, kind of respecting somebody while really detesting them at the same time. That was Coach Stockin, right? He would be up on the pool deck with his little whistle.
Right.
And we'd do 10 200s on 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's 80 laps. That's one set, and having just blow the whistle again and just go, and you're literally dying for air. So it was, when I reflect back on it, I'm like, it's a heck of an experience, kind of like SEER school or these combat engagements that people get to go in, or some of the night flying that I got to do. These are things that would inform you and make you humble, and make you recognize. First of all, I'm really glad to be alive, for the amount of times that frankly I shouldn't be, and secondly, to give you that sense of, I guess, accomplishment, or I'm good. Like if I don't ever get on a roller coaster, I'm good. I flew a CH-53 Echo helicopter around for 2,500 hours and 11 years, and those types of things make you, at least make me feel like, okay, I got that young man super ambition stuff kind of out of my system.
Settled,
Now what am I going to do with my life that matters?
Right.
And that's where I found myself basically in a forced situation to retire for whatever my circumstances were. I mean, being stationed as a Marine, being stationed at NAS Pensacola, that's considered Mickey Mouse land to Marines. So,
I guess so. Kind of backing up going from the swimming coach and the success there.
Swim team. I was never a coach.
The swim team. Going from that to the Marines. What was that transition?
One was some family and my best friend went Marine right out of high school. He had a horrible experience. He got out. He got kicked out. And then my uncle was a Marine when I was a teenager. He was a Force Recon Marine. He had some stories, but I had very little contact with him. What did it was one day after practice, swim practice, walking into the Humanities building, and there was Captain Donahoe, his staff NCOIC, and I said, whatever that is, that's what I want to be part of when I get out of here. Because I had gone through 6 or 7 years of trades work with my next door neighbor who was a master tradesman, master builder. So I learned a lot of, home building and development or subcontractor trades. And I did not want to go back to my hometown and swing a hammer for the rest of my life. Yeah. And that uniform that's the swim team in terms of that team thing on steroids. Yeah. And so I met with Captain Donovan. He said, hey, you want to fly? I said, Marines fly? Yeah. He said, just take this test, and passed it by the skin of my teeth, the AQT and the FAR exam. I got a combined score of 10, which is the minimum score that you can get. Went down to flight school knowing for sure I would never pass flight training down here at Whiting Field and all that. And on my way down here, I went through the infantry officers course because I knew that I wanted to be an infantry leader, an infantry officer, when, not if, but when I failed out of flight school. That's was my upbeat attitude about my capabilities back then. Came down here, did fine in flight school, went on to fly the venerable CH-53 Echo with those three guys in that picture.
Okay, so that's this picture, That's great. I relate so much to a lot of what you talked about. So growing up in Memphis, my mom worked at an orphanage, and so I ran around with the orphan kids, right? Like, and I didn't know any difference. Like, kids are
they're
kids.
Just my friends.
Yeah, and they had a director there who made us run like 3 miles pretty much every. Like, that was the thing. It was like Monday through Friday. We were running, and like once you got to the end of it, you got a soda, you got a Coke, right? Like, and so that was just my life. And then, and it was frustrating at times. I don't feel like running today. I don't want to do this, or kids jawing at each other. But he would keep track, and he would do this whole thing where, once you got to 100 miles, he gave this little plastic trophy, and you think, right? And it was part of my life that was just kind of, I did it. But then once I hit middle school and high school, I could, cross country, I could run, like I was one of the fastest kids there. Not anymore, but it was one of those things of kind of like, I hated that he pushed us, but at the same time, there was this benefit, and the military offers that a lot too. I know exactly what you mean, talking about survival school and stuff, of like having to face off against that instructor that you hate, but then at the same time you make it through and you're like, I passed, like, right?
I passed, but I had to go to the water board. So that was not fun.
I know about that too. Yeah, but it kind of, it formulates this attachment, source of you want to be challenged, you want to be pushed against, but you once you start to have success on that, you expect it, and then it becomes a lifestyle, of constantly pushing yourself. So talk to me about this photo. You were talking about some of your experiences operationally, right?
Yeah.
From what you can tell me.
No, it's all good. It's all open source, so to speak. I mean, that aircraft is pretty well known. It's the biggest, most powerful heavy lift aircraft or vertical lift aircraft. Western inventory. And it's the CH-53 Echo, and that's lifting a 18,000-pound 198 howitzer, which I think are out of the inventory, long gone by now. Underneath that would sling 8 shells at a rough about 1,000 pounds. That I think they were about 1,000 pounds for the 8 shells.
Okay.
And then all the crew would get in the aircraft too. So that the thing would move that cannon. However 20, 30 clicks, we'd drop it off, get out of the way, and they would shoot down range and all that. And that was won an award at Headquarters Marine Corps way back in 1995. I'm actually in the Dash 2 aircraft. I wasn't doing the pick right there.
Yeah.
That's a guy named Hightower was the aircraft commander there.
Yeah.
But, anytime anybody asks me for a photo of, that kind of captures what we did, what weapon system did we do it in, and who did we do it for, well, that kind of touches on all of it. Those Marines underneath that helicopter are helicopter support team. They're not infantry. But you get that sense of support that we provided the Marines, and the 53, like many other flying weapon systems, are a crew serve system. So you can't fly that thing without your crew chief, without your co-pilot, without your gunner. You need to come together as a team, as opposed to jumping in a fighter as a single seater and going off and here's the keys, sir, it's safe to fly. No, this thing, they fix it, and we land that thing after a 6-hour flight. It's got anywhere from 40 to 100 maintenance man hours just to get ready to fly again.
Yeah. And the way I try to communicate it, because not everybody's got the military experience and things like that, but when I'm overseas, I've done it several times, the experience I try to relay is, imagine yourself at like your peak proficiency at work. If you've ever been there for a long time or been doing the same project for several weeks or years, and you're just like, man, I got this. Like, I'm at the best I can possibly be, and I'm doing the most output, that I can imagine myself doing. Like, that's what it feels like, to me, to be in these situations, is after being out there for several months, overseas. That's all you're doing. You're just, you're working, and then you're waiting for the next day, hanging with the same people, building the friendships and stuff. But you become that team, and you have to, right? Because you're there, you're stuck together. And you just hit this place of just like, it's like the zenith of your work life in terms of what you're capable of doing, things that are very difficult at home. Well, you don't have the distractions out there. You are your job at that point, for survival purposes and everything else. And so you're just doing incredible stuff, right?
And the proficiency levels increase. They increase at diminishing rates because, just like bringing your time down on a 100 freestyle.
Yes, exactly.
You can bring it down 5 seconds when you first get into the pool. But 6 months later, after training every day, it's like getting that 1/100th of a second. It's the same thing with flying these kind of thing, or any kind of crew serve weapon system employment. You really want to get good at what you're doing, and like you said, you're out there, focused,
right?
And it's an experience. Again, I can never do it again. It kind of is. It's sad that I don't get to fly that thing anymore. But what a memory, and what a big part of myself.
That's part of the challenge we'll get into is like coming out of that experience, and then remembering it and finding new purposes, right? But you mentioned the people, right? The team, and as soon as you saw me, this is, I think, is your retirement, advertisement. Say, hey, people, come out. This is the in-fight, back in 2009. And I love that you did it with a friend, right? I don't even know this guy, but I'm sure that this was your friend that you had a lifelong bond with, and that's so much of what it's about too, right?
I can't say enough about that individual. He led and mentored literally tens of thousands of Marines. In my opinion, should have left the Marine Corps as a 4-star general. Maybe gone beyond that. Capabilities like no other in terms of leadership, in terms of visionary. So it's one thing to be a visionary. It's another thing to be a leader. But the ability to have that vision and galvanize a team through incredible articulation of what it is that your vision is and how to go about achieving it, and being able to, on a butcher block, I mean, just take people, make them understand the goals, where we are, where we need to be, how we're going to do it together, and then get into this delegation mode and have an expectation of performance and excellence, right? Excellence and performance. And he put me in a position to kind of understand the vision, motivate or inspire me to give everything I had, and then have that trickle down through the staff, which was a big staff. There's 279 Marines at MATSIC 21. Before you're probably not familiar with the Marine structure over there, but back when he was a CO,
Right.
there was just one colonel's command for the entire southeastern section of the United States.
Yeah.
Our one-star flag chain of command was up in Quantico, Virginia. That's 1,000 miles north.
Right.
So
right.
he was the senior Marine for all the Marines here at Eglin, out at Meridian, Mississippi for all the strike fighter guys. Everybody up at Whiting Field. We had Marines at Keesler. We had Marines at Panama City. EOD here at Eglin. All those Marines fell under Colonel Holsworth.
Got it.
And he came down here and he made a difference from 2005. He went off to combat in 2007 to be the OPSO for 2nd Marine Air Wing
Yeah.
to fight the war in Al Assad Air Base. But before he went, he put in place an ETP, Enhanced Training Program. We took thousands, literally, about 16,000 Marines during his time alone that went through the schoolhouse and put them through what we called Enhanced Training Program that filled their white space. Because they're down here for
Yep.
they
I
come
know.
down here,
Yeah.
they go to hydraulic school or
Right.
whatever. They're 5 hours behind a point and mouse click on all this, and then they're left to their own devices. If
Right.
they've got Liberty, they'll go out in town and get in trouble. If
Right.
they don't have Liberty, they're bored to tears. Well, he said that's enough of that. Give them their 5 hours of training of classroom stuff or whatever the instructor stuff is for the schoolwork, and then let's get them trained up on their Humvee license or their 7-ton license. Let's get them IED sustainment training, Block 1, Block 2, because guess what? There is no Marine infantry surrounding or providing the perimeter defense at Al Assad Air Base. It's our wrench turners, our hydraulics men that need to suit up and go outside the wire, test fire the 50 cals, get in a convoy, and go and win the hearts and minds of the surrounding towns around Al Assad. I know because I went out there and did it while he was out there, and making them better prepared for the operational forces meant when they were done with their A and C school and they joined their commands out in the fleet, they didn't have to go away for 3 days to go to get their pistol range qual because we did it here.
Yeah.
We had to dust off the Navy's range over there because they don't use it. But how hard is that? You know, they don't have to go off to a 7-ton school or a Humvee school to get their license because we gave it to them all
Take
over
care of
here.
your people, right? Yeah.
Took care of the people and made a better prepared Marine for combat operations.
I had a commander who was like that when I was deployed the second time, and he and I worked together because, you know, we like you talk about we got good at our job, right? We got good at our job. We were doing our thing. He was happy with what we're doing. But at the same time, in terms of like recreation, like you can only work, like especially Air Force guys, we can only work out so many times. You know, like for us, it's like 2, right? That's the most you can do in a day for us. And he was just like, what else can we do as a team? And we worked with our security and all that kind of stuff, and got the proper clearances from the embassy in the country we were in to essentially adopt an orphanage, right? And it wasn't mandatory; you didn't have to go, but like everybody ended up doing it because he was like, all right, if we can get the clearances, we will head out, go to this place, make sure it's secure, and then we'll see what we can do. And we just showed up, and then we were like, all right, we're just here to help, right? And the first couple days that we did this, we were just doing the typical like soccer ball with the kids, and you know, like watching them color and like talking to them. By the third visit, we were doing like a force protection analysis, and we were like, hey, I think we can secure this barrier here to make sure nobody like steals any of our school supplies, and I think we can rearrange that and optimize the educational efficiency of the classroom. Like we were all in, you know what I mean? We started using our military skills for good, and our hobby like became something very fulfilling. Yeah, it was fun, right? So like we'd do our job, and then like our recreation was like, you were having a ton of fun doing the same thing, right down the street.
And the second, third order effects
he was
are all
loving it.
positive, right?
Yeah,
For the kids,
he's
for
like
the orphans.
Yeah, because he's like, okay, now we can go back and chill at the house, right? Like, so things like that. A commander who, you know, allows us to craft something that's productive and positive for our team without dictating it, builds that kind of loyalty, you know, and those lifelong relationships. And then talk to me about this picture.
So that's my youngest son getting through recruit training up at Parris Island, and I stumbled upon that photo while looking for stuff for this little gig.
Yeah, how old is he now? How's he
He's
today?
31.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, 31.
So was he like 18, 19?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fresh out of high school, you know, maybe 80 pounds soaking wet after, you know, graduating number one out of almost 595 Marines at his company. And he was marathon. What do you call that? Ironman.
Okay.
Which is the #1 physical fitness Marine out of
Wow. So
595.
he took it to the next level.
Took it to the next level. Certainly, as far as I was concerned, he was already running what we call 300 PFTs in the Marine Corps, and it took me till I was 28 years old to run my first PFT.
Okay.
So he crushed it physically, and then he went on to what's called ITB, or Infantry Training Battalion, before he goes out to his command. And he finished #1 there for Ironman as well, and then he went off to
that's incredible.
BRC, or Basic Recon course, and got a hit a roadblock there.
Yeah.
And then went over to supply school over at Camp Lejeune, and then ended up with VMFA, I think 225 or whatever. Did a deployment with them. Got out after 5 years in the Marine Corps. Did a lot of weapons work out at Parris Island, where we were stationed after the F-18 squadron. And then EMS for 2 years here at Escambia County, and now he's a Pensacola police officer.
Yeah, the culture, you know, like is now spreading throughout the family.
And that was his first salute. I think first salute to an officer, but I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah.
But he insisted, you know.
Yeah,
and that's what
I can't
happens
imagine
on
what that
graduation
feeling
day,
is.
yeah.
My son is 6, so I mean he gets a karate belt. Like that's where we're at, you know. Like I can only imagine the feeling. But that's incredible.
Tremendous.
How do you like, given, you know, just 22 years, right? Like family. Like how do you balance that? There's you know, along for the ride, and you know, all the different bases and the deployments, and I mean, everybody wrestles with that that's been in, you know, is balancing your family life and taking care of them. What lessons did you learn and develop as you were going through this with him to come out on the other side? You know?
Yeah, you know, I think a lesson anyway is everybody's got to live their own life, right? Because reflecting back, you know, I made decisions that I would consider to be really important / critical decisions, and making them when I didn't need to make them.
Yeah.
So, you know, in my case, I chose to go to OCS. I made it, and I got commissioned, and I went off, and so I made that big life.
Yeah, becoming
decision.
an officer, right? Yeah.
Right, and making the commitment emotionally, mentally, physically, financially. I mean, I was all in, and learning the culture, and doing everything I needed to do to be successful. I was learning my weapon system. I was getting proficient. Helicopter second pilot, then helicopter aircraft commander, and all the training that goes involved, all those flights and all that kind of stuff. And during flight school, you know, I met somebody. You know, you fall in love, kind of thing. And then, is this the right decision? Well, I don't know if it's the right decision, because I don't even know myself well enough to know who I want to be with for the rest of my life, let alone this person that I think I want to. And so the Marine Corps says, well, that's nice, figure it out, but guess what? You're executing orders after you get your wings, and you're going to California.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean.
You know, so
you know,
figure it out, but we're not going to get involved in your personal life, and that's obvious. You get to make your own decisions, and so we make decisions, especially as young people. Again, this is me reflecting back on myself, because everybody is a different story, but in my case, I made decisions based on my circumstances, and I think most people do that. And so, like you say, you know, in my case, I made that decision, got married, adopted my oldest son, had 2 more real quick, and then got into the deployment cycle. You know, and so now I'm gone, not only gone for 6 months at a time, but I'm doing workups for MUs, Marine Expeditionary Units, which requires to be gone for between 6 and 8 months prior to the 6 months that you're really gone,
right,
to do all the workups to get proficient.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Yeah.
And then I got a spouse that says, yeah, I'll be fine. Well, you're 22 years old. You don't know you're going to be fine. None of us know what it's like to be in a deployment cycle and have 3 kids and be in a foreign place where you don't have any family, in this case, California. So, you know, I don't know if we're looking at trying to give advice or anything like that to the younger generation.
Sure.
But you know, it's just, you got to manage those critical decisions, and sometimes it just makes sense to live out one critical decision, or as few critical decisions at a time, before you start layering on the complicated life, because life actually takes some time, you know. And I thought I was in a rush, you know, and looking back, I'm like, wow, you know, this 30 years has gone by since I went through flight training. No, 33 years. Yeah. And when I was a kid, I couldn't even imagine 30 years in the future, but it went by like that, you know. Yeah. So so balancing the time, that was a real problem. You brought that up, that sparked something within me immediately. I couldn't balance the time, because the Marine Corps said, you're going to do this, this, and this. Yeah. And in order to be successful, oh, by the way, at at your chosen profession, which is to be a tactical helicopter pilot, you're going to have to, on top of this schedule, you're going to have to do all this focusing and studying. And I'm not good at a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm horrible at a lot of that stuff. So, it led to some unfortunate things taking place, midlife
Sure.
type of stuff. And then, I befriended. I did some good work with a Marine that I really looked up to, and
Yeah.
he returned the favor and asked me to come down here to be his XO. So I was number 2 at MATC 21 for 5 years. My
Yeah.
last 5 years of my career. It's a time frame in my life I'll never forget, like a few other time frames. And that time spent with that mentor and that leader gave me a kind of a whole new perspective on who I was
Yeah.
as an individual with respect to giving, prioritizing focus, energy, activities, deeds, actions, words that have to do with other people and their circumstances, and meeting people, whether they be Marines or other veterans or anybody, meet people where they are. And through the relationship building process, barriers to communication come down. When those barriers come down, topics come up, understanding is made, and problems can be either resolved or solutions can be brought to bear to address that layering effect of negativity.
Yeah.
And if we can pull one layer back, that's what I call a course correction.
Yeah.
And suicide prevention, to get into that frame of thought here.
Yeah.
Suicide prevention, you can't really prevent suicide. It's like preventing terrorism. It's an act that will always be available to somebody, right? You as a free-willed human have the ability, frankly the right, depending on how you feel, to pull the trigger.
Right.
But it's that relationship-inspired course correction, baby steps this way, as opposed to continually going down that path of not communicating, not connecting, layering on more problems, not finding proper solutions to critical problems, and then adding those things that really irritate everything, which is prescription grade medications typically, frequently, and alcohol and things like that. Bad
We
environments.
covered a lot. So I think we're kind of putting all the pieces here of like we talked earlier on about the culture that surrounds the military, the unique lifestyle, the challenges therein. And we've hit a ton of them, right? We've talked about moving from place to place, trying to hold on to family, what they go through. We've talked about the proficiency of your job, the relationships that you build, all this stuff. I mean, it is enormous amount of unique factors. I would add one more on the family piece, because I kind of experienced this. My wife was in for 6 years, and there was a period of time where she deployed, and I was the one at home. And I was like, wow, this is hard, right? Like, it was, because I thought, initially being like a lieutenant or whatever, right? Like only a couple years in, I thought, okay, she's going to do her thing, and I'll be the one chilling, watching TV at home. And she was having a blast. She was out there in the Middle East, like doing her thing, and again, peak proficiency, right? And she had all these cool stories, and I'm just sitting here watching reruns, missing her, and I'm like, this is so hard. And so the times I stayed in, much longer, but I always remembered that, and I had the utmost respect for people who are the ones at home. Sometimes that's the hardest part of it. And I had a friend of mine. He just he went out the door, and his wife is at home, and she's like, "So this is my plan. In a week, I'm taking the kids, and we're going to go on this camping trip. We're going way out west. We're going to go see Yellowstone, this, and then we're going to see, the Grand Canyon, that, and then I'm going to go see my parents, and then probably the in-law." I was like, "You're doing so well." I was like, "That's it," because her identity, she's crafting an identity while he's gone, not just sitting there like hurting every day. I was like, that is so healthy. I was like, good for you. Like, that's what you got to do. So there's these unique challenges, and then there's the response. And you've mentioned, drinking, drugs, all that stuff, but then there's also positive responses, the mindset, the actions that you take. That's what I want to get into, because clearly, this has formed so much of what you're doing now. The lessons that you've taken, the friendships that you've had, your perspective, your experience. I mean, it's still clearly vibrant and active, and in numerous different organizations, this being one of them, right? You were talking about it a little bit already, but what is a hero? What does it stand for? What's the vision behind this that you're a part of?
I didn't know how this conversation was going to go, and now I see that photo up there with my sweetheart kitten on the back there, and the first picture should be our founder, right? Our founder's a not so young anymore Major Lee Stuckey, who retired I think in 2020 as a
Yeah.
major. He was an infantry officer, ground officer. Spent I think 3 combat tours.
Yeah.
I can't remember where they all were. Most of it in Iraq, early years of Iraq, 2004, I think, 2007, 2009. Something like that. And in 2007, he ran over a tank mine in his MRAP vehicle. Got a traumatic brain injury from that. He survived, obviously, as did all the Marines that were in that vehicle at the time.
Wow.
Engaged the enemy on multiple times. Marines from his unit didn't come home. He witnessed some pretty horrific physical activities, and fell into that routine of how do I make these feelings go away?
Yeah.
Or how do I not think about it? I try not to glamorize or justify people's inability to deal and say it's okay to self-medicate. I don't, but that's what happens, right? And so in his case, he was self-medicating, and he was being prescribed an incredible amount of medications, many of which he should never have been on.
Yeah.
It's all in his record. They've been shown through, So in 2009, it all culminated, and he went to put the pistol in his mouth, a Glock with no safety on it, and one in the chamber. And that's a really dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
And at that moment, his phone rang, and it was there, and he picked it up and said, "Mom." Dropped the phone, he dropped the pistol. And so that's the kind of the catalyst that got him to say, hey, I got 400 acres up here in central Alabama. It's absolutely God's country. There's all this wildlife. I need my team back. I need help, because if I'm going through this as a Marine Corps officer, as a captain at the time, then I can only imagine what our young enlisted are going through, who have even less resource, right?
Yeah.
And so he called me up. He was actually the second in command of 6th Marine Corps Recruiting District. He was the XO up there in Montgomery, which was responsible for all of our high school, our local recruiting stations. And so he was actively recruiting, or his guys, his Marines were actively recruiting 2 of my 3 sons at the time. Both of them ended up going through recruit training. And he called me up, and I was the XO over at MATSE. He called me up and he said, "Hey, sir, I'm working with your son, but I've been watching what you're doing. I wonder what your thoughts would be to kind of help me start something."
Yeah.
And he kind of talked about having the access to the land and the hunting and being out in nature and all that, and I could feel it in his voice how serious he was. I really didn't even know the story at that point about the setting himself up with a suicide situation. Come to realize that later on, but I said, sure, I'll do whatever I can do to to help and mentor, whatever. And so that started it, and that was 2009, and 14 plus years later, we've put more than 10,000 veterans have touched a hero in one way, shape, form, or another. We've had 2 suicides that we know of those thousands of veterans. We're not proud of the 2. Josh Burnett was a huge punch in the gut to us. He was a double amputee, 6 combat tour veteran, like I said, double leg amputee. He just was overwhelmed one day and pulled out the sidearm and took his life in front of his child. And it was a horrible incident that kind of put us all back on our heels, because that wasn't supposed to happen to us at a hero. It wasn't supposed to. We just took it really personal.
Sure.
And there was one other that I didn't know the circumstances as much, but the good news is that it's thousands of them coming together, and over the years we came to realize that in small groups especially, the secret sauce, the magical potion, is this. It's the relationship.
Yep.
And the relationship is what is the catalyst, or is the start of a bunch of positive actions and decisions that create a course correction to go down this path, instead of that path down that leads to isolation, misery, despair, and a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And isolation, that's the word I picked up on the most, is that place of being where you think it's just you, or you think there's no one who understands. And I understand what you're talking about with medicine, and people throw that at you, and okay, sure, that changes my physical state or chemical state, but does it actually fix what's broken? You know.
Well, it's proven it doesn't. It's
Yeah.
allopathic medicine is designed to address symptoms.
Right.
It's not
But the
addressing causes.
isolation of, why am I feeling this way, right? Because you're going through that system. You're going through that military system. We already described it in this show of, the ascension and can I actually make it here? I mess up, but then I get another chance, and now I made it. Achieving things you never thought you could, getting to that peak profession, having that team, and then coming out of that, and then be like, wait, what just happened? Why do I feel, so alone? Why do I feel anxious or panic or, all this kind of stuff? And then who do I turn to when I feel that way? And I got some medicine and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So, speaking into that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a toolkit.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the federal government doesn't have the right toolkit. It has a kit, but the tools that are in it are largely ineffective or downright wrong for a lot of individuals. So
what's the outdoor piece of this? Because it's American heroes enjoying recreation outdoors, right?
Yeah,
So what's the
small tweak there? So it's America's, as in our nation's heroes.
Yeah.
And by the way, 5 or 6 years ago, we extended all of our programming to first responders, right?
Okay,
'Cause
right.
There's really no difference in what they do, what we do.
Yeah, they deal with a
In
lot
fact,
of trauma.
a lot of
and
them,
things.
they do it much more frequently, right?
Yeah.
Especially in certain cities.
Absolutely.
Certain areas. So America's Heroes Enjoying Recreation Outdoors, and it basically started as a hunting club up in central Alabama. Now it's turned into access to about 100,000 acres. Multiple community high fence farms donate their properties so that we can bring in relatively small groups of veterans and put them up for typically 3 nights, 4 days of hunting and community and fellowship and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it is exactly that. I mean,
it's amazing.
you two scenarios for the hunting side that and honestly, I don't hunt. I go up there to be with the guys, but that's not my thing. And I get a lot of work done on my computer when I go hunting. I handle the fishing down here because this is my home. And I'm not even a fisherman, but I know people with boats, and that's the best way to be a boat owner is to not own a boat and have a friend with a boat. But my point is that in these times of events, outdoor events, being out in nature in and of itself is really significant. And we lose sight of that when we work in a cubicle and spend half our life on a screen scrolling.
I was going to say, so the Air Force in me, like the technocrat, is you're pulling people out of the information age and the oversaturation of
and it's
so many messages, very few of them healthy.
So effective. It's really helpful. Great. You put two veterans that never met with each other except the night before at a welcome aboard event over a fire pit.
Yeah.
Right. And we're no substance, no alcohol policy with A Hero. So, you're not masking your attitude or your personality. No, it's real right off Jump Street. So there's a little bit of an acceleration factor to how we operate.
I love
Something
it.
like SEER School or whatever, if you went through that.
Yeah.
And it works because what else are you going to do? You're going to pull some sort of attitude with a fellow veteran. I mean, come on, we all served, right? So we have that common bond, even though we didn't serve together technically. You have that bond, and then you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning because that's the program.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, I remember, doing this, right? You get up and you go up in a tree stand and you spend the next 4 hours with a fellow veteran.
That's wonderful.
Waiting on Bambi, right?
Yeah.
You have to whisper. You have to whisper. And so you're whispering to not scare Mr. Turkey out there, or Mr. Buck that's waiting to be, that's waiting to identify you. And those 4 hours of community bonding or bonding with that person is incredibly effective at being able to get to some truths and to some realities of the other individual.
That's awesome.
Same thing on the deck of a 72-foot Viking sport fishing yacht.
Fishing,
as big as those yachts are, those fishing yachts, the back deck of it is very small, and you're going to spend 6-8 hours being a captive audience out deep in the Gulf of Mexico, breathing that clean air.
Yeah. Detoxing.
And detoxing. And
you talked about bonding, so these are some folks that I think we both know. Lorraine and Jason.
That looks like Lorraine and is that Jason Scoble?
Yeah, Jason. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's American Legion 382, and
right here in Navarre. Yeah.
Right here in Navarre, and I put a smile on my face because Lorraine is the woman in charge around this town, as far as I'm
100%.
concerned. If I ever need anything,
the meetings over there, you can tell. Yeah.
Right. And I've met her a couple times, and she's been very supportive of A Hero. I've got to work with her on a couple of occasions. And, it's one of those things where Navarre is to the east, and for some reason I'm always going west into Pensacola. I live in Gulf Breeze, so I'm going to the west. And I never come down here, but when the organization or the mission or the A Hero event calls for it, I know that if I'm going to need some support,
Yeah.
I'm going to call American Legion
That's
382,
great.
and specifically Lorraine. So, message to Lorraine: please don't ever leave the Legion.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing organization as well. But yeah, it's got that same kind of like the bonds, the friendships and stuff, and it's not quite on the level that you're describing in terms of what they can create, because you're getting secluded and all that stuff. But you go to their meetings and stuff or their events, and you get a piece of that too.
Yeah.
You get you're surrounded by people who
We're so fortunate.
connected.
Living
Yeah, absolutely amazing. A couple other things about this, and then I know you got some other organizations we're going to talk about, but this is the magazine that y'all put out. So you do, the retreats and all that stuff and the events. What's this about with the magazine?
Yeah, so the magazine is a function of an incredibly talented woman named Connie. She happens to be my mother.
There you go. That's
and,
great.
Brownie points for Dave.
Yeah.
But she really is. She's got a whole lifetime of writing and editing and publishing and working with those types of organizations and working with large. In the case up in Connecticut, she was the content writer for St. Vincent's Hospital. So she did all of this interviewing with doctors to come up with content for their website and things like that. And so I had spent my adult life basically away from home, touring around the country. I settled down here. So basically from the time I was 22 till the time I was 43 when I retired, and up till I was 54 or 55 years old, we weren't together. She was up there in the Northeast, and so she came down here in 2016, actually moved in with me for a few years, and then got an apartment here, spent 6 years down here, maybe 7.
Wow.
And in that time, A Hero had really matured into a very effective veteran suicide prevention organization, and she suggested, why don't we try to do some sort of publication.
Yeah.
We met with one of our web clients out of Alabama Coasting, as it says on the upper left-hand corner there, and they were all about it. They said, yeah, let's do it. And
this is keeping the culture going, right?
it's keeping the culture going, and we have 9. That's the current and the 9th edition. It's 120 pages of almost all content, because I'm horrible at selling advertising. Horrible at it. And it's an expensive production endeavor, but it really stands the organization apart. It is a professional representation of who we are, what we do, and who we do it for. And that cover really says it all. Austin Owens is our local digital artist.
Amazing.
He works for Lensi Film doing videography work, but he is an incredible artist and comes up with these ideas. We have a 10-minute conversation about a topic, and he comes back with a drawing of what he wants to do. And in this case, you've got the song, healing through song, and we do a lot of what we call music for a hero, where we bring the professional singer-songwriters down from
that's so cool.
Nashville and other places. They do a workshop with a veteran, and you just can't believe the amount of effectiveness, the amount of emotion that can get crammed into a 3 to 5 hour workshop environment when you've got a veteran who might not take to telling his story to a loved one or whatever, but with somebody he doesn't even know who's a professional songwriter. These guys have got #1 hits with Billy Ray Cyrus and George Strait and all that. Wow. And they come in and they're like, they write a song in 2 hours, and then that night they play it live on stage. And then they go into the recording studio and they record the song. And it's all about the life and times or the experience of the veteran. That is a cathartic, therapeutic experience that very few get to have, but it can really change the course correction.
Well, in music, like you said, expressing yourself, because we've had these experiences, they're very unique. How do you actually talk about them? And for years you can't talk about them, and then figuring out how do I unload some of this stuff in a different way. That I remember coming back from pretty much all my deployments, but music was a huge part of it, of winding down, because you don't get the chance to do that when you're out there hardly at all, if ever, right? Like you're just doing your job and stuff, and then coming back and trying to engage that creative part of your brain, trying to stand it back up and and release some of those emotions and connect with a beautiful part of human nature, so that's amazing. I love it. And then, like we talked about, combating the information age. There's, I would imagine you go to one of the, the events that you guys have, an amazing experience, but then you come back home and now, you've got those same influences, the temptations and everything else, and having something to turn to reconnect with that experience, right? Picking up a magazine and looking through it, being like, hey, there's people that understand me. I'm not alone, right?
Absolutely. And for those of your watchers, listeners, viewers, whatever, if they can get into this magazine, they turn it to page, I think it's 18 or 19, and they're going to see Rusty Tabor, he's our lead singer-songwriter out of Nashville, incredible career up there, and he just pours his whole heart and soul into the songwriting workshops for each veteran or first responder.
Yeah.
He came down to last year's Freedom Quest event, which we'll talk about.
Yeah,
briefly.
yeah, we'll talk about the next. But yeah.
He came down at the Rex Theater. We did the event, and we teamed him up with Fire Chief John Kanzig, who was the Midway Fire Chief right here, right up the street on Highway 98 here. And it turns out Chief Kanzig rolled up on a fire. I think it was 2015 or thereabouts, and it was a house fire, and it was bad, and there was a lot of heat coming off that house, and they could not get in, or at least all the way in. And there was Skylar, a 15-year-old teenager, burned alive in her shower.
Gosh.
And he had to listen to those screams until it was over and put out. And he had to live with that for some period later. He found himself with a firearm and losing his wife and contemplating ending it all. And thankfully for all of us, because he's a very senior member in the firefighting community. He's currently the president of the Southeastern region of the Firefighters Association. He goes up to Washington, D.C., lobbies for our firefighters across this portion of the country. But we almost lost him, and he wrote a song with Rusty Tabor last year during the morning portion of the songwriting workshop. And that night at the Rex Theater, Rusty performed the song, I Was Leaving You. And it was all about how he couldn't cope with everything that was going on, and he was losing his wife to the emotions. And they performed the song. Chief Kanzig got up on stage. It's all covered in the magazine. John got off after telling the story. Rusty sang the song, and Skylar's mom was at my table, and I didn't even know it. And she was so appreciative to have that kind of, hey, let's not forget my daughter.
Wow.
And he got to do that
story.
in front of his wife. And so, you can't not have experience. Once it's done, it's part of your past, right? And those emotions, that opportunity to maybe address something that might have gone unspoken prior to singing the song and performing the song and being in that environment with Skylar's mother and all that, it changes things.
Absolutely.
Typically for the better.
Incredible. So let's finish it out with Freedom Quest, because you'd mentioned that a couple times. What is that, so people know?
So Freedom Quest is a recognition of what went down on 9/11/2001. Probably don't need to rehash that. It was pretty devastating, as we spoke about before going on air. 343 dead firefighters in one day. 72 law enforcement officers gone in a day. They passed the baton, our first responders, up to the military, and we go off to combat, and 7,000 killed in action, 53,000 wounded in action over those ensuing 20-plus years. And about 115,000 dead by suicide and or drug abuse, drug overdose, depending on what statistics you believe in. And so it was an incredibly devastating event, and everybody knows that. Sometimes we get it compared to Pearl Harbor. I would argue you really can't compare. Pearl Harbor was a military target. Pearl Harbor wasn't Hawaii wasn't a state until 1959, and this was 3,000 dead civilians. So we were hit at home. We won't get into what we think about what actually happened that day. The point is that the 20th anniversary in 2021 came upon us, and we were all being rolled over with this whole COVID nonsense, and it begged the question: what is this community, the greater Pensacola Bay Area, the Gulf Coast, 7 major DoD installations, all these transitioning military into first responder roles, all these veterans, all these retirees, all this infrastructure? What is this community going to do to commemorate the 20th anniversary? And I asked a few questions. I'm like, who's planning what or whatever? And so we put together a few people, one of which, probably the most important one, lives a couple blocks from here. His name is Pez Merrier. And he's been in festival production for 35 plus, probably closer to 40 years now. And he has a festival main stage equipment. He runs all production down at Baytown Wharf and all that kind of stuff. And I went to borrow some stage decks for one of our Music for a Hero events, and he talked to me about what he was feeling about kind of some of the bigger issues facing the nation and our community. And I was like, man, I feel that times 10. And he goes, oh yeah? Wait a second, wait right there. And he goes into his house and he comes out with a t-shirt, and it says, "Freedom, not fear," surrounding a tattered American flag and a burned-in cross. And I was like, man, that is exactly how I'm feeling. We got to do something. He goes, yeah, well, that's my idea, is to do something. And I'd like to put on a concert on the same day in 50 states that's addressed to things like our Constitution, our rights, our freedoms, the amendment process, all those things. And I was like, look, man, I know some folks from the music industry around here, but I'm a medium fish in a very small pond here. So why don't we just try to do something here? So we put on that event. We had all the first responder, chiefs of police, fire chiefs, 7 special forces showed up with a bunch of tactical weapons and units for display. We had the Life Flight fly helicopter into Pensacola State College. Sheriff Simmons from Escambia County spoke. Judge Burgosh spoke. Keith Hoskins, former Blue Angel commanding officer, spoke. And Jill Hubbs, who's a Gold Star daughter from her dad, still missing in action in Vietnam, out of WSRE, good friend of mine, wonderful woman. She spoke. And then we had live music from guys like Dave Bray, USA, and who's coming in again this year for Freedom Quest. The point was, let's do something to remember what it was, and let's set the standard for other communities in the nation to not rely on New York City, Washington, D.C., or Pennsylvania to be the only communities that remember this most impactful event that took place in our nation's history. And so now we're on the 23rd or 24th year of since 9/11, and we're going to do it again this year.
Right.
And we combine Freedom Quest. I'm the president and founder or co-founder of Freedom Quest. Obviously, I'm the vice president and co-founder with A Hero. And A Hero really focuses on veterans, active duty military veterans, and first responders, and in many cases, their dependents and family members.
Yeah.
A Hero takes that same focus and expands it to the overall community. Because me personally, and the people that I spend a lot of time with, feel that there's real pressure on the nation. Coming at us at all levels. I think most of your viewership would probably agree. And probably they're saying, what do you mean pressure? That's kind of weak, Dave. It's more than pressure. We got an open border. We got illegals.
I was going to say, like, the country's tearing itself apart.
Yeah, I feel like we're tearing ourselves apart.
I really do. Yeah,
and
I feel that a lot.
And so, what's this attack on our free speech and censorship? What is that? Why? How can you deplatform a president of the United States? So there's things going on. It's like I can't explain that. Like I don't have an answer for that, and it certainly is not. These behaviors, these actions that are being taken, are not codified in the U.S. Constitution. There's so many things that are happening that go against our Constitution. So Freedom Quest says, yes, stay focused on our military veterans, our family members, our first responders, our Gold Star family members that raise these people to become servants to our communities. Because what's the point of having a military if we have chaos in our cities?
Right.
We need our firefighters, we need our law enforcement, and our EMS and people that do those things. But in addition to those core competencies, those core concepts and things that we support, we believe that our rights are being infringed upon, and things like the ability to pursue a faith in a higher power, right? Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it's your choice is the point. Free will and freedoms and rights is what matters. And then secondly, so that's our first tenet at Freedom Quest is faith in a higher power and your ability to pursue it as you see fit. Number 2 is our understanding, faith, and respect in the Constitution of the United States of America. That single document, 4,532 words, shortest constitution on the planet, but the single most effective piece of writing ever, say, barring the Bible, right? I mean, that Constitution was laid out by some incredibly brilliant people that put it together for us as our forefathers. And so that, and the amendment process, the Declaration of Independence stated we are created by, we are free as designed by our creator, and we have this document as a forcing function for that, and we better protect it, and we better get back to it. And so the Constitution is our second tenet, and again, the military, veterans, first responders, and the Gold Star families. I use Gold Star because obviously that's a huge, gaping, sunken chest wound to a family when they lose a loved one in the service to their nation or service to their community. And so those are the things that guide Freedom Quest, and then we expose the people. Freedom Quest endeavors to set an environment that says, look, it's not red versus blue, although we use those colors to show that divisiveness that's going on. It's not liberal versus conservative. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not two sides of the aisle. Come on, we all know that all these issues are gray matter. There's all kinds of details, but there needs to be some standards and some laws that are followed. And so Freedom Quest endeavors to set an environment for people to come together and not feel constrained in their ability to speak. You have to be able to speak. You have to have that First Amendment right, and you have to be in a position of comfort to be able to have these conversations and not worry about, am I going to be censored? Am I going to be arrested by the FBI because I said something against the current administration or something? I mean, this is what's going on. J6 case in point.
Right.
So So again, we're not trying to get skyline ourselves, but we have to come together as a community, because these types of environments, these types of ability to have these dialogues allows us to bond and to come together as a community, because we're going to need each other.
Yeah. Wow.
We're going to need each other.
There's so much. I want to have you back on, and we could just talk about that. Like we could just. I feel like we could go another hour, and we'll have to do it sometime, because I have so many thoughts. Because you talked about how veterans that are in a tough spot, right, going back to a hero, you pull them out of that, out of the information age, and the saturation with all the temptations and everything else. You get them into a place, with nature, to reconnect with your humanity, with the actual world, and with each other. And then out of that flows this positivity that is overwhelmingly helpful and enriches each of their lives, right? And now I feel like you're talking about something very similar with Freedom Quest. My thought is like, it's not just veterans and first responders, although of course we need it, but now it's at a point where everybody needs it. That's in our country, it's like there's trauma everywhere. Or at least divisiveness and isolation and despair everywhere. So whether you've been to war or not, it feels like we're in a war here, domestically sometimes, because people just hate each other so much. And what's the solution to that? What's the answer? It's like you go on your phone or things like that, and you just see more people hating, and to be able to get them out of that, to have a place where they can express themselves and talk and start to reform those bonds around, the first principles, right? What brought us together as a country. I mean, that exists almost nowhere, David. Like I don't hear people talking that way or offering that opportunity, and our nation is desperately needing that, in very much the same vein as any military person or veteran has been through a tough time. I see that all over, people struggling,
It's significant, and the political scene. I consider myself to be relatively active in supporting those people that at least are saying, and in most cases demonstrating, that they're going to get into whatever capacity. If they get into that capacity, meaning they get elected, they're recognizing the same issues that we're talking about, and they have plans to engage and change things. And that's good, and we need that, and we need to support those candidates, and I will in a big way. And Freedom Quest is a platform to do that.
Yeah.
Now, the event this year and every year takes place in September, because we always anchor ourselves to that never forget concept of 9/11. Right. So, and politically speaking, our primary election season is here in August 20th in Santa Rosa County and Escambia. And so recognizing that fact that Freedom Quest as an organization and a platform is going to have little impact on our primary, we do need to understand that Freedom Quest will take place about 45 days before the general election.
Yeah.
Many of us feel that there will be even more kind of chaos and
probably
more censorship and more election issues, integrity issues, things like that as we lead up into this election season. And so what we do at Freedom Quest, at least currently, and I think the platform is going to grow significantly, but what we do there is we bring in speakers to address these 5 or 6 or 7 national level issues that we're seeing on the news or listening to alternative media or podcasts, and we're hearing about the border crisis, we're hearing about the attack on our First Amendment speech and our Second Amendment right to own and bear weapons, or the CBDC movement with the economy and the devaluation of the dollar and inflation, and the school system and the Department of Education, and what we're seeing going on in our schools as far as accepting and being demanded to accept things that are obviously counter to who we are as humans, right? In counterculture. Without getting into too specific, I think most people know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And so the speakers are charged at Freedom Quest in a very short amount of time, 3 to 5, 7-minute long speech, talk about that national level issue, but neck it down and make it relevant to how it's affecting and impacting our lives here locally, and then say, thank you for listening to me. Please go, if you're interested in border security and how it's impacting us, and the fact that we had 200 illegal immigrants dropped off by a bus just yesterday, I think, that Lieutenant Colonel Carmen Reynolds is dealing with right now on a level. If that issue bothers you, motivates you, inspires you to want to do something, but you don't know what to do, please go see Miss Diane Warner over here,
Right.
or Angie Carter, and they will tell you how to get involved with border security as a national issue, but how to do it on a local level because we're being impacted here. Same with the Department of Education and CRT and things like
Yeah.
that. Go see Tom Warner over here because
Yeah.
he's got all of the information on how to get involved at whatever level or whatever degree you find that motivates you or that you have time to do. And,
Yeah.
and that opens the
Most
dialogue,
definitely.
and it also gives people a sense of I can get engaged
Yeah.
on this level or that. And so the communication, the dialogue, the ability to feel like you can speak freely is really important, especially when or if and when really bad things happen.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, we won't get into specifics. I don't need to be referred to as a conspiracy theorist, but let's. I mean, this grid thing or this communication thing, cell towers. These are very fragile systems. People don't understand how fragile they are.
Yeah.
The grid could go down at any moment, and then where are you?
Right.
It takes stock in your food sustainability, takes stock in your ammo, your weapons,
Yeah.
your ability to provide security for your family and your personal property and all that. But what happens if that runs out? What happens if things get really chaotic? Who are you going to count on, I guess is my
Right.
point. So that's like the last part of Freedom Quest is, as an undertow of all of this, let's be community. Let's
Yeah.
be a family beyond our immediate family. Let's know who's got those skill sets that you don't have. Who's
Yeah.
got those stores that you don't have? Who knows how to actually grow their own food?
Yeah.
Very few people are. The soil around here is really not made. You have to be pretty green in the thumb to be able to grow your own food around here. And we are, let's face it, we are geographically challenged with choke points. Highway 98 is a big one.
Yeah.
Garcon Point Bridge, Pensacola Beach Bridge, Highway 98, and this place is cut off.
Right.
And I know people are thinking about this, and maybe I'm going too deep into it, but
No,
it's
not
a
at
big
all.
topic, and,
Yeah.
and Freedom Quest offers a big platform, and
just-
it's open to everybody.
What I hear consistently is there's the trends of where the world is going, especially like the next generation and stuff, and people are formulating their identities fully digitally now. I mean, they're taking pictures of everything that they eat, right? Like they're more alive on Instagram than they are in real life, and creating and manufacturing this like persona.
Yeah.
And you're calling them back to, as you said, their human nature,
Yeah.
their actual existence, and it's so needed
Yeah.
because there's so many forces that are just making money off that and pulling you in that. So God bless you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah, oh,
but
we could.
We've covered so much ground, and I love your heart, David, for this area, for veterans, first responders, but just for building community.
Yeah, let's do
for
this.
bringing people together to actually be themselves. I try to do that, as best I can. Obviously we're doing this stuff on digital platforms,
This is
but
awesome.
but we do it, in person. You can see me, you can
Yeah.
interact. Like I got comments that come through because we're trying to push back on that as
Oh,
well.
comments.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Going
You
through
actually
this-
have an audience. Look
Yeah.
at this. I thought maybe I was just talking into a dead camera.
I think they've all
That's
been in
great.
receive mode. I know that I have, but we've had Randy and Chaz and Nancy and several others on here, all kind of filtering in. So, but yeah, we'll have to have you back on again. I think we're about out of time here
Okay.
for this one, but we'll go through some of these topics in more detail. I think if we bring it back around. But I'm just grateful for what you do, getting to know you, the history that you bring, and knowing the people in Navarre, and knowing that there's people here that
Oh, yeah.
support it as well. So, hey, thank y'all for tuning in.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys being a part of this show and making it fun. David Glassman's organizations, you can hit him up. He's on social media. I can give you his email if you like, or whatever you need. But if you want to get involved in A Hero or Freedom Quest or any of those things, just reach out to him. We can refer him as well. For us, Preserving Navarre Live, we do this every Thursday night at 7. You can jump on our website. You can jump on our social media. We'll be there. And any guests that y'all want me to bring on, happy to do it. But this one was a pleasure. Highly recommended. And you guys can see why.
Thank
So
y'all.
thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great Thursday night. We'll see you next week. All right. Bye.